The rain poured down in torrents, a relentless downpour that hammered the streets and sidewalks of the small town. It was a night that seemed almost custom-made for eerie happenings. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminated the darkened streets. Sarah pulled her coat tighter around herself as she walked briskly towards the antique shop, its flickering sign casting an eerie glow. Sarah was a young mother in her early 30s with long brown hair and tired eyes that still managed to sparkle with a hint of determination. She had been searching for the perfect birthday gift for her daughter, Emily, and had almost given up hope when she remembered the old antique shop at the edge of town. As she stepped inside, the bell above the door jingled softly, and she was greeted by the musty scent of old wood and forgotten memories. "Good evening," came a voice from the shadows. Sarah looked up to see Mr. Hargrove, the shopkeeper, emerging from behind a dusty counter. He was an elderly man with a mysterious aura, his eyes twinkling with a peculiar light that made Sarah uneasy. "Good evening," Sarah replied, offering a polite smile. "I'm looking for something special for my daughter's birthday. She loves dolls." Mr. Hargrove's smile widened, revealing yellowed teeth. "Ah, I think I have just the thing. Follow me." He led Sarah to the back of the shop, where an old, dusty doll sat on a shelf. The doll had an eerie, lifelike appearance, with glassy eyes that seemed to follow Sarah wherever she moved. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, entranced by the doll's detail. "How much is it?" "For you, just $20, Mr. Hargrove replied, his voice low and almost conspiratorial. "But beware, this doll has a dark history," Sarah laughed nervously. "I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll take it." As Sarah handed over the money, Mr. Hargrove wrapped the doll carefully in brown paper. "Take good care of her," he said, his eyes never leaving the doll. "And remember, some things are better left untouched." The storm had passed by the time Sarah returned home. The rain reduced to a gentle drizzle. Her modest house, with its cozy interior and warm lighting, seemed like a safe haven compared to the dark and eerie antique shop. Emily, a bright and cheerful 8-year-old with curly blonde hair, was eagerly waiting for her mother. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Sarah said, handing Emily the wrapped package. Emily's eyes lit up with excitement as she tore off the paper. "Oh, Mommy, she's perfect!" she exclaimed, hugging the doll tightly. "I'm glad you like her," Sarah replied, smiling despite the unease that still lingered in her mind. As the evening wore on, Sarah watched Emily play with the doll. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The doll's eyes seemed too lifelike, almost as if they were watching her every move. But she brushed the thought aside, chalking it up to her imagination. Later that night, as Sarah was getting ready for bed, she heard a faint whispering sound coming from Emily's room. She paused, listening intently. The whispers were barely audible, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. She opened Emily's door and peeked inside. Emily was fast asleep, the doll clutched in her arms. "Must be the wind," Sarah muttered to herself, closing the door and heading to bed. The next few days were uneventful, and Sarah began to relax, thinking that her initial unease had been nothing more than paranoia. But then, strange things started happening. It began with small incidents, lights flickering, doors creaking open on their own, and cold drafts that seemed to come from nowhere. One evening, as Sarah was cooking dinner, she heard Emily talking to someone in her room. Curious, she walked to the doorway and listened. "Who are you talking to, sweetie?" Sarah asked, stepping into the room. Emily looked up from her tea party, the doll seated across from her. "I'm talking to Annabelle," she said matter-of-factly. "She's telling me about her old home." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Annabelle? Where did you hear that name?" "She told me," Emily replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sarah forced a smile. "That's nice, dear. Just remember, it's time for dinner soon." As she walked back to the kitchen, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. She decided to do some research on the doll and its history, hoping to find some explanation for the strange occurrences. That night, after putting Emily to bed, Sarah sat down at her computer and began searching for information on antique dolls. She stumbled upon a forum for antique doll collectors and enthusiasts, where she posted a description of the doll and asked if anyone knew anything about it. A few hours later, she received a reply from a user named dollenthusiast42. The message sent chills down her spine. Dear Sarah, I believe the doll you have described is one of the infamous cursed dolls, created by a dollmaker named Heinrich Weber in the late 1800s. These dolls were known for their lifelike appearance and were said to contain the spirits of children who had passed away. Many believe that Weber practiced dark magic and used these spirits to give his dolls a lifelike quality. It is rumored that he disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and some say his spirit lives on in his creations. Be careful with that doll. It may be more than just a toy. Best regards, dollenthusiast42. Sarah stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She glanced at the doll, now sitting innocently on Emily's nightstand, and felt a surge of fear. Could it really be true? Could the doll be cursed? Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah decided to visit the local library the next day. After dropping Emily off at school, she made her way to the library and asked the librarian for help in finding information about Heinrich Weber. The librarian, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson, led Sarah to the archives. We have some old newspapers and records from that time, she said. You might find what you're looking for there. Sarah spent hours poring over old newspapers, articles, and records. Finally, she found an article that caught her eye. It was dated October 15th, 1893, and the headline read, "Renowned dollmaker Heinrich Weber disappears mysteriously." The article detailed Weber's disappearance and the rumors surrounding his work. According to the article, Weber was known for his incredibly lifelike dolls, which many believed were created using dark magic. There were whispers of strange occurrences and tragedies associated with those who owned his dolls. Weber's workshop had been abandoned, and he was never seen again. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The more she read, the more convinced she became that the doll she had bought for Emily was one of Weber's cursed creations. As she left the library, Sarah knew she had to find a way to protect her daughter. But how could she break a curse that had endured for over a century? That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, haunted by the images of Heinrich Weber and his cursed dolls. Finally, she got up and made her way to the living room where she had left the doll. It sat there, its glassy eyes reflecting the dim light of the lamp. Desperation led Sarah to research ancient rituals and ways to banish spirits. She found an old book on occult practices and rituals that promised to banish malevolent spirits. It was a long shot, but it was the only hope she had. The next day, Sarah gathered the items she needed for the ritual: salt, candles, and a piece of wood from Heinrich Weber's old workshop, which she had found in the library archives. She set everything up in the living room, forming a circle of salt and placing the candles around the doll. Emily watched, her expression blank. "What are you doing, Mommy?" she asked. "I'm trying to help us, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "We need to get rid of the bad spirit in the doll." As she began the ritual, the room grew colder. The doll's eyes glowed, and a dark mist started to seep from its mouth. The air thickened with darkness as the ritual commenced. The doll resisted, its malevolence palpable. Emily screamed, "No! She belongs to me!" Her voice echoed through the house, but Sarah held firm, her determination unyielding. With one final incantation, Sarah threw the piece of the dollmaker's workshop into the circle. The figure of the dollmaker formed from the mist, a shadowy shape with hollow eyes. "You cannot banish me! She is mine!" he roared. "Not anymore! Be gone!" Sarah shouted, her voice steady. In a blinding flash, the dollmaker's figure shrieked and dissolved into the mist, which was then sucked back into the doll. The doll's eyes closed, and it fell lifeless to the floor. The ordeal had left its mark, but Sarah and Emily were finally free. They hugged tightly, the house quiet, and the eerie presence gone. Together, they buried the doll deep in the woods, far from anyone who might find it. "It's over, Emily. We're safe now," Sarah reassured her daughter. "Thank you, Mommy," Emily replied, her voice trembling with relief. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to normal. The strange occurrences stopped, and the house felt warm and safe once more. Sarah and Emily went back to their daily routines, the memory of the cursed doll fading like a bad dream. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was not truly over. She kept a watchful eye on Emily, always looking for signs of the doll's return. It was a crisp autumn evening, and Sarah and Emily were enjoying a quiet night at home. The warmth of the fireplace filled the living room, and the scent of apple cider lingered in the air. Emily was working on a puzzle, her face scrunched up in concentration. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room grew cold. Sarah's heart raced as she looked around, her worst fears coming to life. "Emily, come here," she said, her voice trembling. Emily looked up, confused. "What's wrong, Mommy?" Before Sarah could respond, a familiar whispering sound filled the room. It was the same eerie whisper she had heard the night they brought the doll home. She turned towards the source of the sound and saw it. The doll was back, sitting on the mantelpiece, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. "No," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with dread. "It can't be." Emily stared at the doll, her eyes wide with fear. "Mommy, it's Annabelle. She's back." Sarah grabbed Emily and backed away from the doll. "Stay behind me, Emily," she said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. The doll's eyes seemed to bore into Sarah's soul, and the whispering grew louder. "You cannot escape me," a voice hissed, filling the room with malevolence. Sarah knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't let the doll take control again. She remembered the ritual and the piece of wood from the dollmaker's workshop. It had worked before, and it had to work again. She grabbed the piece of wood from the drawer where she had kept it, forming a circle of salt around herself and Emily. "Stay inside the circle," she instructed, lighting the candles and beginning the incantation. The room grew colder, and the dark mist began to seep from the doll's mouth once more. The figure of the dollmaker emerged, his hollow eyes filled with rage. "You cannot banish me again!" he roared. "I have no choice," Sarah replied, her voice unwavering. "You will not take my daughter." With a final, desperate effort, she threw the piece of wood into the circle. The dollmaker's figure shrieked and dissolved into the mist, which was once again sucked back into the doll. The doll's eyes closed, and it fell lifeless to the floor. This time, Sarah knew they had to make sure the doll could never return. She took Emily to the woods, carrying the doll wrapped in a cloth. They found a secluded spot and dug a deep hole, placing the doll inside. As they covered the doll with dirt, Sarah spoke softly. "We have to say goodbye, Emily. This doll brought nothing but darkness into our lives." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye, Annabelle. I'm sorry." They buried the doll deep in the ground and placed a heavy rock over the spot. "It's over now," Sarah said, hugging Emily tightly. "We're safe." As they walked back to the house, Sarah felt a sense of relief. The doll was gone, and they could finally move on with their lives. Weeks passed, and the sense of dread that had hung over the house began to lift. Sarah and Emily found solace in their daily routines, cherishing the moments of normalcy that had been so elusive. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Emily looked up at her mother. "Mommy, do you think Annabelle is really gone?" Sarah smiled and brushed a strand of hair from Emily's face. "Yes, sweetheart. She's gone, and she can't hurt us anymore." Emily seemed to relax at her mother's words, her eyes brightening with hope. "I'm glad. I like our life without her." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with love for her daughter. "Me too, Emily. Me too." As they settled in for the night, Sarah couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. The memory of the doll and the dollmaker's curse would always be with them, but she was determined to protect her daughter no matter what. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Life had returned to a semblance of normality for Sarah and Emily, but the specter of the cursed doll still lingered in the back of Sarah's mind. Emily had adjusted well to their new town and made new friends, and for a while it seemed the darkness was finally behind them. However, one evening, as Sarah was unpacking a box of old photographs, she found a picture of the doll. It had been taken on the day she had brought it home, Emily's face glowing with excitement. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and an icy chill spread through her. She could have sworn she had destroyed all evidence of the doll's existence. That night, she dreamed of the dollmaker's workshop. In the dream, she wandered through the dark, cobweb-filled room, the oppressive weight of unseen eyes following her every move. She could hear the faint whispers of children's voices, and in the shadows, the dollmaker's hollow eyes watched her. She woke up with a start, drenched in sweat. The clock on her nightstand read 3:00 a.m., the witching hour. She knew then that the curse wasn't entirely broken. Emily, oblivious to her mother's inner turmoil, had made a new friend at school, a girl named Lily. Lily was the same age as Emily, with a mischievous smile and an adventurous spirit. The two became inseparable, often spending time at each other's houses. One afternoon, as Sarah was preparing snacks for the girls, she overheard their conversation. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Lily asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and excitement. Emily hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe. My mom says they're not real, but sometimes I think they might be." Sarah's heart ached. She wished she could protect Emily from the memories of the doll, but she knew that some things could never be fully erased. That night, after Lily had gone home, Emily came to Sarah with a question. "Mommy, do you think Annabelle is really gone?" Sarah knelt down to look her daughter in the eye. "Yes, sweetheart. We buried her and she can't come back. But what if she does?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "She won't," Sarah said firmly, though she couldn't ignore the doubt gnawing at her own heart. "We're safe now." Despite her reassurances to Emily, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It started with small things, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, the sensation of cold air brushing past her in an otherwise warm room. She tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but the incidents became more frequent. One night, Sarah was working late in her home office. The house was silent, and Emily was fast asleep. As she reviewed documents on her computer, she felt a sudden chill. She looked up and saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The figure didn't move. It stood there, watching her with hollow eyes. Sarah grabbed the nearest object, a heavy paperweight, and hurled it at the figure. It passed through the shadow and hit the wall with a thud. The figure vanished, leaving behind only an icy coldness. Sarah's hands shook as she picked up her phone to call the police, but she knew they wouldn't find anything. She was dealing with something beyond their realm. The next morning, Sarah told Emily they were going to visit her friend, Mrs. Thompson, the librarian. She needed more information about the dollmaker and his creations. Mrs. Thompson welcomed Sarah and Emily with a warm smile. "What brings you here today?" "We need to find out more about Heinrich Weber and his dolls," Sarah explained. "I think the curse isn't completely broken." Mrs. Thompson's expression grew serious. "I remember you mentioning that name before. Follow me, I think I have something that might help." She led them to a back room filled with old books and manuscripts. "This is our special collection on local legends and folklore. There might be something here about Weber." Sarah and Emily spent hours sifting through the dusty volumes. Finally, they found a journal that had belonged to one of Weber's apprentices. The journal detailed the dollmaker's obsession with capturing the essence of life in his creations. He believed that by binding a spirit to a doll, he could create the perfect companion. Sarah read aloud. But his experiments grew darker, and he started using more sinister methods. The journal also mentioned a way to break the curse, a final ritual that required confronting the dollmaker's spirit directly and severing the connection once and for all. "It's risky," Mrs. Thompson warned, "but it might be your only chance." Sarah nodded, determination in her eyes. "We have to try." for Emily. Armed with the knowledge from the journal, Sarah began to prepare for the final ritual. She gathered the necessary items: a mirror, black candles, and a piece of red thread. The ritual had to be performed at midnight, under the full moon. Emily watched her mother with wide eyes. "Will it be dangerous?" "Yes," Sarah admitted, "but it's the only way to make sure Annabelle is gone for good." As the night of the full moon approached, Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. She knew they were about to face something truly evil, but she couldn't back down. She had to protect Emily, no matter the cost. At midnight, Sarah and Emily stood in the clearing where they had buried the doll. The moon cast an eerie glow over the scene, and the air was thick with tension. Sarah placed the mirror on the ground and lit the black candles, forming a circle around them. "Remember, stay inside the circle," Sarah instructed Emily. With the piece of red thread in hand, Sarah began to chant the incantation from the journal. The wind picked up, swirling around them as the shadows grew deeper. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and the figure of Heinrich Weber appeared before them. His hollow eyes glowed with malevolence, and a sinister smile twisted his lips. "You think you can defeat me?" he hissed. "We will," Sarah replied, her voice strong. "This ends now." Weber reached out, and the misty form of Annabelle emerged, her eyes filled with a haunting sadness. "Mommy?" she called, her voice echoing with both Emily's and the doll's. Emily clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Mommy, make it stop." Sarah wrapped the red thread around her hand and threw the other end into the mirror. "By the power of light and love, I sever the bond between spirit and vessel." The thread glowed with an ethereal light, and Weber screamed in rage. The mirror shattered, and a blinding flash enveloped the clearing. When the light faded, the figures of Weber and Annabelle were gone, leaving only the broken shards of the mirror. The clearing was silent, the air still and calm. Sarah and Emily stood in the circle, holding each other tightly. "It's over," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with relief. "We did it." Emily looked up at her mother, hope shining in her eyes. "Are we really safe now?" "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe." They returned home, the weight of the curse finally lifted from their shoulders. The house felt warm and inviting, free of the darkness that had plagued them for so long. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Emily began to rebuild their lives. The memories of the cursed doll faded, replaced by new, happier moments. They knew they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, and that bond would never be broken. Years passed, and Sarah and Emily continued to live their lives free of the curse. Emily grew into a confident and resilient young woman, her childhood marked by a strength that few could understand. Sarah often thought about the dollmaker and his cursed creations. She wondered how many others had suffered because of Heinrich Weber's dark obsessions. But she also knew that their story had a different ending, one of triumph over evil, of a mother's love conquering the darkest of curses. One day, as Emily was packing for college, she found an old photograph of herself with the doll. She showed it to her mother, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Do you think we should tell our story?" Sarah smiled, proud of the woman her daughter had become. "Maybe one day. But for now, let's just enjoy the life we've built." And so they did. The legacy of the cursed doll remained a memory, a testament to their strength and resilience. And in the end, they knew they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, bound by a love that could never be broken.